Now, moral values are the principles and the standards that guide our behavior and decision making. They are essential for youth development as they provide a foundation for making choices that are respectful, responsible, and just. Now, moral values and moral choices such as honesty, integrity, compassion, and respect for others are critical for building strong relationships, achieving personal growth, and of course, contributing to the greater good. But tell me why all these seem to be completely lost in today's world. The dangers of moral decadence are far-reaching and now are having devastating impacts and consequences for individuals, for families, and communities. When moral values are eroded, young people are most likely to engage in more risky activities, risky behaviors, experience emotional and psychological distress, and of course struggle with relationships and academic performances. But anyways, today we are discussing moral decadence, moral values as opposed to moral decadence in today's world. What is the cause for it, and what can be done about it? This is Fafana Africa, the show where we spotlight the youths, their challenges, their opportunities, and the biggest issues that they face across the African continent. My name is Blessings Mosugu, and I will be your host for the next 1 hour, so stay with us. Now, the battle for the souls of our young or the youth is a critical one, and it requires a concerted effort from families, from communities, from educators, and the society as a whole. But many seem to have lost the battle, especially because we are in the era where if you talk, you collect. So regardless of your age, whatever you do, if you try to correct a young person, especially if you're not their parent or their guardian, then there's a big trouble. And this is what we'll be discussing today on Fafana Africa. I have my guests who will be joining us. First, we have joining us all the way from Winneba in Ghana, Emmanuel Kabu. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for joining us. Can you please confirm you can hear us? All right, Emmanuel, I think your device is muted. If you could try unmuting and speak to us again. All right, while we're waiting for Emmanuel, we also have joining us from Ghana, Cynthia Teye, Early Childhood Educator. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for joining us. Okay, and I have joining me in the studio, Aduralere Ladipo. I hope I got that right. A clinical psychologist. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Did I get the name right?
Yes, Aduralere Ladipo.
Ooh, I got it. Thanks for joining us. We also have in the studio John Abel, a student and a writer. Thank you, John, for joining us as well.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let me try and confirm if Emmanuel can hear us before we continue. Emmanuel, can you hear us? Okay, I think we're still having issues with your audio. We'll try and see how we can rectify that. While we wait to sort that out, let me start with Aduralere. What would you say are some of the primary factors that contribute to moral decadence among the youth in today's society? It goes without saying that the level at which people uphold moral standards has drastically dropped over the years. Why would you say that is?
Okay, so I would look at it from the perspective of the home. So the family is a very important factor in our society today. And if you remember back in primary school, they'll tell you the family is the first unit of the society. So has anyone ever thought to understand why the family is the first unit of the society? Because everything a child needs and everything a child would become starts from the family. The level of exposure a child has begins from the family. So a lot of things we see today in our society, we can trace it back and question what is happening with our family culture and our family system today. So the family should really be looked into. And as a clinical psychologist, we get cases of young adults, youth, adolescents coming into the facility for care because of a lot of early childhood experiences, adverse early childhood experiences that they have had that has contributed to some of the behaviors that we are seeing. So, and in psychology, we like to look at things from how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. So if a person is behaving differently. You want to understand their thought pattern. What is making a person think the way he or she is thinking? So what has formed the source of a person's mind? Why is a person understanding life the way they are? Before you can solve any issue, you want to know that. Then, before you can now dovetail into things like peer pressure, or maybe substance use, or even media. There are reasons why people use all of these things to medicate their symptoms. So there are behavioral symptoms we see in the society today that are medicated with substances, media, and a lot of other habitual behaviors that are not appropriate. So, but first, like I started, I would like us to look at the family. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. John, let me get your own perspective. Do you share the same thought with her regarding what the causes are for moral decadence?
Absolutely. And if you check very well, you realize that if you look at the statistics, then the statistics are always pointing out absentee fathers and single mothers. So it thereby states that the root of this problem is the family. And just as I said, the family is more than something of society.
Okay. Oh, sorry, please hold that thought. Want to go on a short break. When we come back, please don't forget what you were saying. We'll continue the conversation. Many thanks for staying with us. We're still talking moral values versus moral decadence. We're talking about the reasons why the level at which people uphold moral standards has drastically dropped over the years. And I still have my guests with me in the studio, Aduralere Ladipo, and of course, John Abel. We're still trying to sort the audio out with Emmanuel Kabu, and I believe that they will let me know once that is done. But in the meantime, John was trying to say something earlier as regards the cause for moral decadence in the society. Please go ahead.
Yeah, like I was saying, the family is the basic unit of the society, and so it should be held responsible for anything that goes wrong in the society. And you might be asking why. The reason is this. If you look at the statistics are clear. Children who are raised by single parents or those who are raised by absentee fathers, you get that these children have less than 20% of succeeding. And all these contributes to the moral debasement of the society.
Okay, so let me come back to you at earlier. Now, if we compare let's say, few years ago to now, let's say before technology and social media came to play, we would see that a lot of children were more respectful, they held moral standards high. You know, we had more children who were conscious of tradition and culture, but now we are in a I don't care society. We are in the era where people don't really care, and even on social media it reflects, where people say, oh, I'm speaking my truth, I don't care what people think. Regardless of your age, you can't talk to them, you can't try to correct them, because then they'll come for you, right? What would you say has changed? Would you say that social media has been the changing factor in it?
Well, social media does have, its contributing factors, but much more. I'd like to look at the structure, because and I like the fact that you went back to how things used to be, and how things used to be before was the society was more communal. Like it took a society or a community to raise a child. But now we have a different system where people live with, it's just a nuclear family setting, the husband, the wife, and the children. And a lot of people do not want to have others in their home. But back then, you had a lot of people correcting children when they are wrong. And I remember hearing stories that if you go and report, my mom would tell me that if you go and report that they beat you outside, they will beat you again.
Yeah.
I also experienced something like that. So I'd rather not even show that I injured, that I fought outside than, tell them at home that I did something like that. So those things had an impact. They had its own effect on people's lives. They had its own way of people composing themselves out there. Yes, so you'll see what we're seeing on social media now is a ripple effect of all the experiences that people have gathered thus far without discipline, without guidance, without acceptance or correction, so to speak. There's no one looking and helping you to know that what you're doing is right or wrong, and you know that if you take this back home, it's also going to be the same response you're getting. But now you find out that teachers will tell you that if they beat a child in school and the child goes back home to tell the parent is going to come back to fight the teachers, rather than you understand what your child did to, you know, warrant such actions or such discipline. You know, we don't have those things anymore. So people come out on social media to show what, you know, how they have been fully formed. So it's not, social media can impact, but there are people with good moral standards that are also on social media that are not being influenced. So it tells a lot about where you're coming from and how you were raised and what you've been exposed to over time.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, very quickly, I did mention that we're having some guests from Ghana. I think we're set with them now, and the connection is clearer. So I would like to reintroduce Emmanuel Kabu, Moral Educator from Winneba, Ghana, and of course, Cynthia Teye, Early Childhood Educator from Ghana as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Emmanuel, I'm sure that you probably have been following the conversation, so I'm going to also ask you from your own perspective, what do you make of moral decadence? What would you say are the reasons why people no longer uphold moral standards, especially the younger generation? There's a lack of everything that should make them, you know, morally upright. Why do you think that is?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I am of the view that the moral decadence we are seeing in our society today is as a result of technology and media influence. When you look at our internet service now, it is not regulated. It is unregulated. So you realize that any child, and now all children are using phones. Every child has a smartphone he or she is using. They'll tell you they are doing assignments, even if it is not their personal one, they'll tell you they are doing assignments. By the time you realize they are doing something else. So technology, internet that has not been regulated, especially when it comes to children, it is one of the challenges that is affecting the way growing up now is. And that is what has caused the decline in the way we view things and the way the youth do things in our current dispensation. And again, when it comes to technology, you can put the fact that now there is this face-to-face interaction has actually reduced. There were times where we had our parents and our grandparents and the external family.
I can't hear anything.
When they realize that a child is actually doing something wrong. But now, when a child is even doing something wrong or right, nobody is correcting him because the parents, number one, is not even having the time to stay back at home to take care of the child. Everybody's doing the run to look for the next meal. So it has really affected the way our children grow, and it has affected the way our morality is as far as the youth is concerned.
All right, thank you so much for that, Emmanuel. Let me go to Cynthia now, if we have Cynthia. Cynthia, with the way we're going, right, with the way the trajectory of things are going, what would you say are the consequences of moral decadence if nothing is done about it? Cynthia, can you hear me? Cynthia, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I think we're still having issues with the connection, but let me come back to you, Aduralere. Now, you mentioned something, before I come to John, about students getting beat up in school by the teachers and then the parents going to fight. How do we balance that? Because again, we've seen cases of teachers who just lash out at children, extremely punishing the child. I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we were discussing a case of a, I think 1 year old or 2 or 3 year old boy who was slapped mercilessly by his teacher. You know, so some of these teachers are just projecting their anger, maybe their agitations of some other things that does not concern the child on the children. I had similar situation when I was young. Now, my mom is not someone who pampers children, right? She beats them, and she's also in that generation where if you go out, they beat you, you come to report, she would also beat you. But it got to a point where I remember vividly my brother at some point got flogged so seriously that his shirt was stained with blood. She had to go to school to fight. There was a time that I had similar situation. She went to school to fight. So how do we balance that up?
So schools should enroll their teachers in training. So there are things in my practice that we do for schools, which is very essential. Every school should be trained on how to raise a child. I really would have loved to hear from Cynthia because she's in the education, educates in fact system, right?
Hopefully we can get her soon.
Yeah. So schools should train their teachers. And there's something called punishment and reinforcement. So there are various ways you can punish, and there are also needs and there's also the necessity for reinforcing a behavior that a child does that is good. So the child doesn't just feel like you're always punishing. And to balance the situation of how teachers behave, you know, when teachers are trained, you will learn to observe and understand, so you don't just beat a child at every given chance you get. There are certain punishments that will be more effective than using the cane. And there are times when you know that you might probably need to use the cane because, like you said, your mom is of that same system. Did you turn out okay? Are you behaving unruly on the internet? You know, there are people that had to go through these experiences and it worked for them. So it has to be done with a structure, with system, with I don't know how to put it, but I guess you understand my point.
I get. Okay, so since you were saying you'd love to, let's try if we can have Cynthia again. Cynthia, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Can you hear us? Can you confirm you can hear us clearly?
Hello.
Cynthia, can you hear me? Okay, unfortunately, we're yet to establish that. But John, let me ask you, still in line with, you know, knowing what the extremities are and knowing how to create a balance. Now, we've had so many arguments over time about some parents passing on tradition that they don't entirely understand. And that brings the question of, okay, this generation of children are children who like to ask questions. Like, okay, if they say kneel down or completely go down and prostrate and greet an elder, why should we do that? And the argument is that because the parents cannot exactly tell you why, you don't see the point of it. So a parent who has been trained all their life that that's how you do things, you know, they don't exactly, and it's not, they were not coming from a generation where they could ask their elder ones questions because they would receive slap, you know. So it's now a battle of, oh, you're my parent, you're telling me to do this, and I understand you, but you're not telling me why I should do it. And this generation, we're very vocal, we're open, we want to know the reason behind everything. So again, how do you think that can be balanced? Do you think that parents owe their children explanation on everything that they ask them to do?
Well, it reminds me of a book I read one time ago in The Societal Baggage, written by Aduralere Ladipo. In that text, he tried as much as he can to create a distinction between the two generations and how they operate. Quite all right, we are in a generation whereby we like to ask questions, so it is very good. And sometimes we also need to know that, just as the topic states, moral compass. So I believe, just like me, my father started training me right from when I was 2. So you get something like that. I'm always used to that correction without even asking questions. I mean, you could just say, this is it, this is it. But while I started growing up, I realized that I needed to ask questions. And so it is, I think it's also beneficial for parents to they should also think about the generation. The systems are changing and parents also need to adapt. Else, they might end up losing their children, that's just the truth. The truth is they also need to maintain a balance. They need to adjust to the system and know that, yeah, this is the Gen Z age, like people used to say, yeah. So they need to adapt to it, because if they don't adapt to it, they might end up raising children who are very, very mean and who wouldn't even want to listen to them anymore. So I think parents need to adapt.
Okay. Once again, let me try and see if we can establish connection with Cynthia. Cynthia, can you hear me? All right. Okay, so let me come to you, Aduralere. Now, again, we've seen situations where, like I said, it's more usually like a parent-child battle, right? You know, sometimes you say it's youthful delinquency, but eventually you're like, no, that's just how they are, and things like that. Now, there's several instances where we can easily, in fact, in almost every instance, we can easily narrow it down to the family. Or this girl is behaving so-and-so way is because of where she's coming from. You know, it's because of her parents, it's because of her training. Some would even say, I'm sure if you look at mother, they're the same thing. An apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But we've also seen instances where, you know, we've heard this saying over and over, there's always a bad egg in the family, right? So out of 6 children, there's just that one that would smoke, that would drink, that will party, that would dress indecently. And then the parents would be like, if they see you now, they would think I'm not training my children well. So in that instance, what do we say is the situation? Because we cannot exactly blame the mother. There's something Yoruba say that if a child is trained, you have to retrain yourself or something like that. Yeah, I don't know how to say it in Yoruba, but basically every child needs to get to a point where they now start, like, they hold your hand to a level, but eventually you have to know what to do by yourself. So if you're dressing indecently, you know, on social media, for example, can we entirely say it's your parents' fault? Because we trace it down to your family and we see that every other person is normal except for you. So what do we say in that instance?
Okay, so first, everyone is trained differently. So you can have 5 children, but you need to train everyone differently. You can't train all 5 children the same. So there's going to be an introvert, an extrovert. There's someone that likes to just mix the two. You know, there are different, you know, settings that people adopt. A parent needs to understand that. However, like you rightly mentioned, when you grow, you need to know what is yours. So that comes to, first I'd like to talk about cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is looking at how a person thinks and is looking at the disconnection or the psychological dysfunction that a person gets because of their beliefs and their values. So let me give an example. You've always heard all your life that, oh, don't smoke, don't party, don't do this and that. Then you go into the university and you see girls that are doing that and they are excelling in their academics, they have a steady relationship, they came out and they are the first to get married. So you are, in your mind, there's a discomfort, there's questions with your belief system and your values. So that can make people change. That can make people change how they believe or behave. You know, once your thought pattern changes, it's going to affect your behavior. So that can make people, you know what, let me try something else, because there's already a dissonance in their thought pattern. So that can affect. Then there's another thing where I would like to address is understanding your values. So when I talk to my patients or my clients, I like to look at their value system. Aside from what you've learned so far, what is your own value system? What have you come to know as, this is who I am, and these are the things I stand for. These are the things that form my structure and my foundation. Do people have that? How do you, like when you're faced with challenges or you're faced with excitement, your values should always stand, because every other thing is going to come and build up on your values. So when people do not have that, you're just going to accept anything. You're going to go with whatever flow. You're going to, you know, interact with whoever. And that can in turn affect how people project themselves on the internet, because there's a lack of self-awareness. And for people that, okay, want to represent themselves in some certain way, there will be some level of consequences that they should be willing to attract. That's why you see sometimes people post some things on the media and trolls lash out at them. Someone wants to commit suicide, someone wants to take their life, someone wants to do something. It's because there is a defect in their self-awareness or their foundational structure, not the family now, but as an individual, there's a defect in the foundational structure that you have created for yourself. Consciously or unconsciously, you have a foundation that you are, imprinting upon. So I believe that people should address or look into what their foundation looks like, because when you don't do that, you're going to, like I mentioned earlier, accept and take whatever life throws at you and go with whatever flow that, you see.
Okay, great. Very quickly, Emmanuel, are you still with us? Can you hear me?
Yes, please, I can.
Okay, great. So my question to you is, what would you say the impact of moral decadence will be on the fabric of a society? Because most times when we have this conversation, it feels as though whatever happens with the youth doesn't exactly concern everybody. Whatever they do with their lives is their business. But eventually, we're seeing it spread over and over again. We're seeing more youths begin to buy into the idea of, oh, you only have one life, so you do whatever you want, regardless of what it means morally. So how do you think that moral decadence in general can affect the very fabric of a society?
All right. Before I go to my substantive question, you asked a question early on, and I want to add a little bit to it before I move to my substantive question. Parents have to understand the fact that we are in a different times altogether. And as parents, there is a need to understand the dynamics when it comes to parenting in this day. Yes, there were times when our parents would not have any discussion with us, but they would tell us that go and do this. You have no say. All you have to do is to say yes, as master, then you are doing it. But in this dispensation, we have children who want to be talked to. They want to understand the reason why they should do a particular thing before they do. So parents should have discussions with their children. When your child is going into the youth, now they shouldn't become your child again, but they should become your friends. Yes, that is just with us. Now let me go to the effects of moral decadence, like you rightly mentioned. There are lots of effects that comes with it when it comes to this moral youth and their moral decadence. One of it is that psychologically it affects the youth. You realize that a child will go to school, a young man will go to school, because he or she is not having that right behavior. He or she is behaving so wrong, and everybody's talking about this. He or she is not even able to sync with the rest of his colleagues. You see that such a child is always seen aback, because immediately he or she is trying to make friends, then it's like, hey, the bad boy is coming, the bad girl is coming. Then the child goes away. But then, so it really affects the child. It affects their social level and their personal development. Emotionally, it really, really destroys them. Children will come to school, and while they are supposed to be open and be ready to learn new things, now immediately they are coming. There is that notion that, Charlie, this person is a bad boy, a bad girl. So as he or she is leaving the house alone and coming to school, this is what they always say about me. So he or she is not even able to think with what the teacher is teaching. Though he or she is in class, but the mind is nowhere close to what the teacher is teaching. And when it happens like that, it is really destroying the child gradually. And with time, you realize that the child will become depressed. Then the next moment, you hear that this young boy, this young girl is doing something that is untoward.
Okay, one more time. Let's try with Cynthia. Cynthia, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, thank goodness. It's so good to have you join us. Thank you so much. Okay, very quickly, Cynthia, let me ask you. We've been talking extensively about children, their upbringing, and in the midst of the conversation, we did mention community parenting. We said, growing up, when they beat you and you go to your parents ask you what you did and beat you. But these days, it's a lot of defense going on. Oh, don't talk to my child like that. Don't do this, don't do that, especially when it comes to teaching. And that's why I'm directing the question at you. How can teachers discipline a child without crossing the boundary? Because again, we've seen teachers project their anger, their agitation, and then they do too much. So what is the balance there?
We can't correctly hear you.
Cynthia, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Hello.
Okay. It doesn't look like the network wants us to have Cynthia on this show. Okay, so let me come to John. Again, this, I think, is most highlighted now or most pronounced because of social media, right? We see a lot of moral decadence. When you're scrolling through some of the apps, social media apps, you're just like, I'm sure there's no day that will go by that you won't see someone do something and you'll be like, does this person not have a family at home? So what is the solution from here? If we say the problem was the upbringing, that's water under the bridge. Now the person is what they are. What can be done? What is the solution? Because it looks as though the society also enables it. When you see some of these indecent dressings on social media, that's where you see the most comments. Oh, go baddie, this. So we are enabling these behaviors. And because of that, they're being delusional, thinking that what they're doing is the right thing. And you, who is, coming to their comment section saying, oh, you shouldn't be dressed like this. In fact, people would lash at you and support them. So what do you think can be done going forward?
Well, I think when it gets to this, especially training of children, it is very subjective. You can train a child and the child decides to be whatever he wants to be. Because we are humans and we have the right to think as we want. So because of this fact, I think that the society has also encouraged stuff like this. And so because of that, to a very large extent, I don't think there's anything we can do, except you can maybe do like programs like this that can help youths to try to come back to their senses and understand that, yes, they have a moral compass, something that has been internally guiding them, something that they should remember their morals. So that's why we are always talking about parents, because if the parents instill or imbibe these morals in them, then on the long run, they might one day remember that, oh yeah, I was taught this, or sometimes they might even get to a point where they like, I think this is the right way to follow. You get? But if they weren't taught at all, then I don't think there's any way you can revive them.
Okay. So as a clinical psychologist, has there ever been a breakthrough in any of your cases where first of all, have you ever had a case of moral decadence, in a youth or whatever, and then, because it looks like all hope is lost, but do you think that there are breakthrough situations where these youths especially come back to reality that, okay, this is not the way to go? Because, I think the way it works most times is between certain age bracket,
right,
they do whatever they want to do, and then when they feel mature enough, they now look back and say, no, I was a little bit too reckless. But so do we have to wait for them to outgrow that stage?
Okay, so I see two questions here. The first one was, have I had a breakthrough?
Yeah.
Right. So majority of my clients and my interest is really in substance use.
Right.
Yes. So I see a lot of patients with substance use defects and substance use challenges. And there are, I wouldn't say breakthrough as that they would not use again, because in addiction treatment, we believe that addiction treatment recovery is a lifelong process. So you are recovering every day.
Oh, you're right.
So anything can come and take you back to where you were coming from if appropriate measures are not put in place. So what we do in addiction treatment is we guide our patients and clients in the recovery process to understanding the need for certain things like positive engagement, training them on relapse, that is, they can use again, and letting them know that in order not to use again, you have to take it one day at a time, and there are certain steps you need to know. You need to know how to delay gratification, because when you talk about moral decadence from the addiction perspective, it's like a brain dysfunction. It's not just smoking and or habit. Something has happened to the brain. You have taught your brain a new normal. So you need to retrain your brain. There's a new type, there's a cognitive modification that needs to happen again. You need to retrain your brain to understand how it ought to respond to certain pleasure-seeking habits, and to know how it can take other things that will not cause damages. Then there are also adverse effects of that also we need to let them know that medication is what will manage it. Because with the type of substances that people take today is much more than weed. So we have Colorado that is synthetic and is laced with things that, damages our brain function, and people come down with things like psychosis. And psychosis is you've lost touch with reality, and you need to get your brain with medication to know that what you're seeing as your reality is no longer the reality. This is the new reality. This is the normal reality, and that takes a while. So individuals that have had psychosis would have to live life using medication for a long period of time, or even forever. So these are some of the damages that moral decadence has, caused. And with progress, yes, I've seen cases where people have come out of substance use and they're able to live better life when they follow the due diligence of one day at a time guidance that are being put in place. Because there's a normal structure, right? However, with individuals, it varies. So what I might do for one person might not be what I will do for the other, because of their unique experiences.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Very quickly, Emmanuel, I want to ask, is there such a thing as too much discipline? And I'm saying it because I've seen one too many cases of children whose parents were very strict, whether for moral reasons, cultural, or religious, especially religious reasons. And then, there are certain things in their houses that they couldn't do, they couldn't wear, they couldn't watch. In fact, some people they couldn't be friends with. But immediately they got into university, or everything was just out there. They let loose, basically. And then you'd see pictures of them and you would never have believed that they would either dress like this, have this kind of lifestyle, and you'd be wondering, did they box them up too much, and now they feel so exposed that they want to try out everything? So is there such a thing as too much discipline, and how can that be regulated?
I don't know. I'm not sure if there is a thing like too much discipline. But then, like I mentioned early on, I believe that when children get to a point in their life, there is a need for parents to recognize the fact that now these children are no longer children, but they are now trying to get into their adulthood. So it means at that period, parents would have to do very much possible to create that good relationship with them, such that their children will no longer see them as children, but they will see them as their friends. And they'll be able to have a discussion, but genuine discussion with them, and let them know what their issues are, how they are seeing things, and make them understand that, okay, from my perspective, this is how I'm seeing things. Though you are my father or my mother, you are seeing things this way, but then in this apparent dispensation, this is how things are done. So the parents would come in again and guide the child. You see, there is a difference to love you the more, they come to understand you the more, and they come to think with whatever you want them to do, and their behavior you want them to be behaving when they become adults. To my view, the children, whatever they are doing now, we think they know, but then in some few years to come, they'll be like, did I really do this? Did I really do that? All because of the way parents handle them. But then if parents are able to be friends with them and they don't understand that this is how I really want you to be in future. So that is what I'm guiding you. So if you're not able to go through this process and you want to jump the process, this is how it will become when you don't go through the right process. Like these adults you are seeing who have become so bad and they are nothing to write home about. If you don't want to end up like these people, then you should go through this way. Especially when it comes to religion, let's try to make them understand that based on this biblical fact, as a child, when you're unable to go through this and you jump the process, will it end well with you?
All right, Emmanuel. All right, thank you so much. I would have really loved for us to continue the conversation, but unfortunately that's the much we can take because of our time. But I want to say a big thank you to Emmanuel Kabu, Moral Educator, Winneba, Ghana. I also want to say thank you to Cynthia. I'm so sorry we couldn't get her to join us. Would have been a very rich conversation, getting her opinion, but same old, we'll definitely try and get her on another episode of the show. Thank you, Cynthia Teye, Early Childhood Educator from Ghana as well. I also want to say thank you to my live studio guest, Aduralere Ladipo, Clinical Psychologist, and of course, John Abel, student and writer. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing from your wealth of knowledge regarding moral decadence versus moral values. And we hope that moral standards continue to be upheld. There's not so much we can do from our parts, but we are hoping that these people come to the realization of the fact that there is still such a thing as moral values. Thank you so much for watching. Join us in our subsequent episodes. I'm Blessings Musugu.